The sun was setting, casting streaks of fiery orange and soft gold across the sky as 16-year-old Jamal walked home from school. His neighborhood wasn't the kind that caught anyone's eye. Rows of humble houses, some with peeling paint, others with makeshift repairs. It was a place where people worked hard, dreamed big, and hoped for better days. Jamal's footsteps crunched along the gravel road, his worn sneakers kicking up little puffs of dust. He carried his school bag slung over one shoulder, its straps frayed from years of use. He was tired. It had been a long day of classes followed by a shift helping his neighbor at the local mechanic shop. But even as exhaustion tugged at him, Jamal's mind buzzed with dreams. He imagined a future where his family didn't have to worry about rent, where his mother didn't have to work 2 jobs, and his little brother could have all the books he wanted. Jamal dreamed of being the one to make that happen. But just as he turned a bend in the road, his daydreams were interrupted. The first thing he noticed, "Hold up. Are you really about to miss the twist that's got more drama than a family meeting with jollof on the line? Don't do that to yourself. Hit that subscribe button now and stay in the loop because this story is about to get juicy. Trust me, you don't want to be the one asking, what happened? When everyone else knows." The first thing he noticed was a car, a sleek black luxury sedan parked awkwardly on the shoulder of the road. The car gleamed even in the fading light, a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings. It wasn't the kind of car you saw in his neighborhood, not ever. Then he saw the man, dressed in a sharp suit. The man was pacing beside the car, his movements jerky with frustration. He had his phone in one hand, but from the way he kept glancing at the flat tire and muttering under his breath, it was clear he didn't know what to do. Cars zoomed past, their drivers barely sparing a glance at the stranded man. Jamal hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should get involved. What could someone like him, a teenager in hand-me-down clothes and a school bag that had seen better days, offer to a man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom? But then he remembered something his late grandmother used to say. Kindness is a seed. Plant it anywhere, and it will grow. Jamal took a deep breath and approached the man. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "Do you need help?" The man turned, his sharp features softened by surprise. He looked at Jamal, taking in the boy's scuffed shoes, his slightly oversized school uniform, and the earnest expression on his face. For a moment, the man said nothing, as if he couldn't quite believe someone had stopped to help. "If you know anything about fixing a tire, I could use the help," the man admitted, his voice tinged with frustration and relief. Jamal set his school bag down, his heart pounding. "I've done it before," he said confidently. "Let me take a look." The tools in the trunk were shiny and high-tech, unlike the ones Jamal was used to working with. But he adapted quickly, rolling up his sleeves and getting to work. His hands moved deftly, loosening bolts, lifting the car with the jack, and carefully fitting the spare tire into place. The man watched in silence at first, then spoke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, genuinely curious. Jamal looked up, a small smile playing on his lips. "Because you need help and I can help," he said simply, as if that was all the explanation needed. When the job was done, the man looked at the newly fitted tire, then back at Jamal. "You did a great job," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." But Jamal shook his head firmly. "No need, sir. I was happy to help." The man stared at him, taken aback. Finally, he asked, "What's your name, son?" "Jamal," he replied. "I live just down the road." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Jamal, you've made quite an impression on me." "Thank you." Jamal picked up his bag and continued his walk home, the evening breeze cooling the sweat on his brow. To him, it was just another act of kindness, another small moment in his ordinary life. But little did he know that one act of kindness had set something extraordinary into motion. Little moments can ripple into big changes, and Jamal's simple decision to help a stranger was about to turn his life upside down. If you're curious about what happens next and the incredible twist in this story, don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, You won't want to miss what's coming. The fading sunlight painted the gravel road in warm shades of orange and gold, and the gentle rustle of the trees offered a calming melody to the quiet countryside. 16-year-old Jamal crouched by the flat tire, his hands steady as he studied the problem. The tools in the car's trunk were polished and unfamiliar, a far cry from the old, well-worn equipment he was used to at his neighbor Mr. Sampson's workshop. After a quick inspection, Jamal stood and brushed his hands against his pants. "Sir," he said, glancing at the sharply dressed man standing a few feet away, "these tools are good, but they're complicated. I'll be right back." The man, who had introduced himself earlier as Mr. Richardson, looked at Jamal in surprise. "Wait, where are you going?" Jamal gestured down the road. "Just to borrow some tools from a neighbor. I'll be back in 5 minutes." Without waiting for a reply, Jamal jogged off, leaving Mr. Richardson standing by the car, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity on his face. True to his word, Jamal returned minutes later, a dusty wrench and a sturdy jack in hand. "Sorry for the wait," he said, already kneeling by the car and setting to work. Mr. Richardson crossed his arms, leaning against the car as he watched the boy. "You didn't have to come back, you know," he said, his tone neutral but tinged with curiosity. Jamal glanced up briefly, his face breaking into a small smile. "Would have felt wrong to leave you stuck out here, sir. Besides, it's not every day I get to work on a car like this." There was an ease in Jamal's movements, a quiet confidence that belied his modest appearance. His school uniform, slightly oversized and patched in places, clung to his frame, and his sneakers had seen better days. But none of that seemed to bother him. As he worked, Jamal hummed softly to himself, the tune a calming rhythm that contrasted with the frantic energy Mr. Richardson had been exuding earlier. The man couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm watching the boy, despite the absurdity of the situation. A millionaire, stranded in the middle of nowhere, being helped by a teenager with borrowed tools. "You know, Mr. Richardson said after a while, his tone softening, "I've seen plenty of people drive by tonight. None of them stopped. Not one." Jamal paused briefly, his fingers tightening a bolt. "Maybe they thought you had it handled," he replied simply. "Or maybe they were just in a hurry." "And what about you?" Mr. Richardson pressed. "Why did you stop?" Jamal shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "My mom always says you help when you can, sir. Doesn't matter who it is or what they look like." He looked up, meeting Mr. Richardson's gaze. "And, well, I could help, so I did." For a moment, Mr. Richardson didn't respond. There was something in the boy's words, something pure, unguarded, that struck a chord deep within him. In his world, where everything came with a price tag, selfless kindness was rare, almost unheard of. By the time Jamal finished, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. He stood, dusting his hands on his jeans, and stepped back to admire his work. "There you go, sir," he said, his tone bright and satisfied. "Good as new." Mr. Richardson walked over, inspecting the tire. "You did a great job, Jamal," he said, his voice laced with genuine appreciation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp bill. "Let me pay you for your trouble." But Jamal shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "No need for that, sir. I was just happy to help." The refusal caught Mr. Richardson off guard. He had expected Jamal to accept the money. Who wouldn't? But the boy's sincerity was evident, his words carrying the quiet confidence of someone who understood the value of doing good for its own sake. "What's your name, son?" Mr. Richardson asked after a pause. "Jamal," the boy replied, extending a hand. "Jamal Thompson." Mr. Richardson shook his hand, his grip firm. "You're a rare kind of person, Jamal," he said. "Where do you live?" "Just down the road," Jamal said, pointing toward the dim outline of houses in the distance. It's not far. With that, Jamal picked up his borrowed tools and his school bag and began the short walk home, the sound of gravel crunching under his feet. He didn't think much of the encounter. To him, it was just another chance to lend a hand, another moment to live up to the values his mother had instilled in him. But to Mr. Richardson, it was something more. He stood by his car, watching Jamal until the boy disappeared into the shadows of the trees. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he climbed into his car, his mind racing with thoughts. Jamal thought it was just a tire, just a stranger, just another act of kindness. But Mr. Richardson saw something far greater. If you're curious about what happens next, how one small act of kindness sparks a life-changing twist, hit that subscribe button now. The best part of the story is just getting started. The air was cool and still as Jamal tightened the last bolt on the spare tire. The sleek black car, once immobilized by a flat, now stood ready to take on the road again. Jamal straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. The satisfaction of helping someone was evident on his face, though he didn't think much of it. It was just the right thing to do. Mr. Richardson, the man whose night had been saved by this young boy, stood a few feet away, his sharp features softened by a mixture of gratitude and astonishment. His expensive suit, now slightly wrinkled, bore the marks of his earlier frustration. Hands clenched, pacing back and forth, and futile attempts to resolve the problem himself. But now, the frustration was gone. In its place was admiration for this boy who had shown up when no one else did. "You're something else, kid," Mr. Richardson said, stepping closer. His voice was steady but carried an emotion he wasn't accustomed to showing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, extending it toward Jamal. "Here, you've earned this." Jamal hesitated, looking at the money. For a moment, his tired eyes flickered with surprise, but then he shook his head. "Thank you, sir, but I can't take that." Mr. Richardson blinked. "What do you mean you can't take it?" "It's just a small token of appreciation for what you did tonight." Jamal smiled, his expression kind but resolute. "I didn't help you for money, sir. I just wanted to help." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Mr. Richardson, a man who had built his empire on transactions, deals, and negotiations, found himself momentarily speechless. It wasn't often he encountered someone whose actions weren't tied to personal gain. You don't see that kind of humility much these days, Mr. Richardson finally said, slipping the bill back into his pocket. "What's your name, son?" "Jamal Thompson," the boy replied, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "And where do you live, Jamal?" Jamal gestured down the dark road. "Just a little ways that way. My mom and my brother are probably wondering why I'm late." Mr. Richardson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Jamal. Your family must be proud of you." Jamal's smile grew, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Perhaps the quiet acknowledgement of the struggles his family faced. "I just try to do my best for them," he said simply. Mr. Richardson extended his hand, and Jamal shook it firmly. "Thank you, Jamal," the man said. "You've reminded me of something important tonight." Jamal tilted his head curiously, but Mr. Richardson didn't elaborate. Instead, he watched as the boy picked up his tools and slung his worn school bag over his shoulder. As Jamal walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the night, Mr. Richardson leaned against his car, deep in thought. This wasn't just a kind boy. This was someone extraordinary, someone who deserved more than the world had likely given him so far. Mr. Richardson climbed into his car, the engine purring to life. But his thoughts lingered on Jamal. The boy didn't know it yet, but this encounter was the beginning of something much bigger. Jamal thought it was just another good deed, another chance to do what his mother had always taught him, to help when you can. But Mr. Richardson had other plans. The next morning, Jamal's world would be turned upside down. If you're intrigued to find out what happens when a black SUV shows up at his house, make sure to subscribe. This story is far from over, and the best part is yet to come. If you're feeling this story, kindly take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel. The next morning dawned quiet and unassuming, like every other day in Jamal's neighborhood. The sun cast a warm, golden glow over the rows of modest homes, each one brimming with stories of resilience and dreams. The soft hum of life filled the air. Children laughing, a distant radio playing a soulful tune, and the comforting clatter of pots and pans as mothers prepared breakfast. Inside the Thompson household, Jamal sat at the worn kitchen table, helping his younger brother Malik with his math homework. Their mother stood by the stove, humming softly as she stirred a pot of oatmeal. The aroma of cinnamon and sugar filled the air, a small but cherished comfort in their modest life. The room was filled with the usual chatter, Malik giggling as Jamal explained fractions in his patient, older brother tone. But then, an unfamiliar sound broke the tranquility. A low, rumbling engine echoed through the street. A sound far too smooth and powerful for their humble neighborhood. The conversation in the kitchen stopped abruptly. Jamal's mother paused, spoon in hand, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What's that sound?" she asked, turning toward the window. Jamal exchanged a puzzled glance with his brother before standing up. He moved to the window and peered outside. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. A sleek, black SUV was rolling slowly down their narrow street, its glossy exterior catching the morning sunlight. It was the kind of car Jamal had only seen on TV or in the magazines at the corner store. The vehicle came to a stop directly in front of their house, the engine purring to a halt. "Jamal, do you know who that is?" his mother asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I think I do," Jamal said quietly, his thoughts racing. The car doors opened with a smooth, almost theatrical precision. From the driver's side stepped a sharply dressed man in a tailored navy blue suit. Jamal recognized him immediately, Mr. Richardson. His confident stride carried him to the sidewalk, where he paused, surveying the modest surroundings with a curious but respectful gaze. Behind him, another door opened and a woman stepped out, clutching a sleek leather folder. Her crisp blazer and sharp heels added an air of professionalism to the scene. A third figure emerged, carrying a small, elegantly wrapped gift box. By now, the entire street was alive with curiosity. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, their whispers filling the air. Who were these strangers, and why were they here? Inside the Thompson home, Jamal's mother wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Jamal, are you going to tell me what's going on?" "It's the man from yesterday," Jamal said, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "The one with the flat tire." Before his mother could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was firm but polite, echoing through the small house like a bell. Jamal's mother took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the door. Mr. Richardson stood on the porch, his expression warm but composed. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his head respectfully. "I hope I'm not intruding." "No, of course not," she replied, though her voice carried the faintest hint of nervousness. Mr. Richardson turned to Jamal, who stood frozen a few steps behind his mother. "Jamal," he said, his tone softer now, "I told you yesterday that you're a rare kind of person. Today, I want to show you what that means." He gestured to his associates, who stepped forward. The woman with the folder handed it to Mr. Richardson, who opened it carefully. The man with the gift box remained silent, his posture respectful as he held the box in front of him, like a prize offering. "What's all this?" Jamal's mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Richardson smiled. "This," he said, looking at Jamal, "is my way of thanking your son for his kindness and ensuring he gets the opportunities he deserves." The sleek black SUV, the millionaire on the porch, and the mysterious gifts, they were more than the Thompsons could have imagined. What exactly did Mr. Richardson have in store for Jamal? If you want to find out what happens next and witness a twist that will leave you speechless, hit that subscribe button. The most touching part of this story is just around the corner. The living room of the Thompson household was a humble space. The cushions on the old couch sagged slightly, the coffee table had a faint wobble, and the wallpaper bore the marks of years gone by. Yet, it was filled with warmth, a testament to the family's love and resilience. And now, it was hosting an extraordinary moment. Jamal sat perched on the edge of the couch, his younger brother Malik beside him, their mother seated close by, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from them, in their small but welcoming home, sat Mr. Richardson, the same man Jamal had helped just the evening before. Beside him, his assistant held a letter folder, and another staff member stood with a small, beautifully wrapped gift box. Mr. Richardson leaned forward, his gaze focused on Jamal. There was no trace of the frustration or helplessness he had shown the night before. Instead, his expression was calm, almost reverent, as if he understood the magnitude of the moment he was about to create. "Jamal," he began, his deep voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "What you did for me yesterday might seem small to you, just helping a stranger fix a flat tire. But to me, it was so much more." Jamal swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "You stopped when no one else did, Mr. Richardson continued. "You gave me your time, your effort, and your kindness. And you asked for nothing in return. In my world, acts like that are rare. They remind me that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in character. And you, Jamal, are rich in a way many people will never understand." Jamal's mother wiped a tear from her cheek, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Malik looked up at his older brother with wide eyes, his admiration growing by the second. Mr. Richardson opened the letter folder, pulling out a set of documents. "I've thought about how I can repay you," he said. "But I don't just want to say thank you. I want to invest in your future." The room fell completely silent. Jamal's mother leaned forward slightly, her breath caught in her chest. "I've spoken with the principal of a prestigious private school," Mr. Richardson said, placing the documents on the coffee table. "They've agreed to offer you a full scholarship. Tuition, books, uniforms, it's all covered. I want to make sure your talent and kindness have the opportunities they deserve." Jamal blinked, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to process what he was hearing. "A scholarship," he finally managed to whisper. "Yes," Mr. Richardson said with a nod. "It's a school that will challenge you and prepare you for any future you can dream of, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to succeed." Jamal's mother covered her mouth with her hand, her tears now flowing freely. This is too much," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Mr. Richardson turned to her, his tone gentle but firm. "It's not too much for a boy who's shown such remarkable character. But there's more." He gestured toward the man with the gift box, who stepped forward and placed it in Jamal's lap. "This," Mr. Richardson explained, "is a token of appreciation for your family. Inside, you'll find a check, a monthly stipend to support you while Jamal pursues his education. Think of it as an investment in the future of a family that has clearly raised a boy with extraordinary values." Jamal stared at the box, his hands trembling as he carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a check, a sum so large it made his breath hitch. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at his mother, whose face was a mixture of shock, gratitude, and overwhelming relief. Malik clung to his brother's arm, too young to fully understand but sensing the gravity of the moment. Jamal finally found his voice, though it wavered. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "You've already done that," Mr. Richardson said with a small smile. "The way you live your life, the values you hold, that's thanks enough. All I ask is that when you're in a position to help someone else, you do it without hesitation. Pass it on, Jamal." Jamal stood, his legs shaky, and extended his hand. Mr. Richardson rose to meet him, their handshake firm, but filled with emotion. "I promise," Jamal said, his voice resolute despite the tears streaming down his face. For a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the sound of quiet sobs and the weight of gratitude too immense for words. The Thompsons' small home, which had seen its share of struggles, now radiated with hope and possibility. One simple act of kindness, a flat tire fixed on the side of the road, had transformed not just Jamal's life, but the future of his entire family. It was proof that good deeds have the power to ripple far beyond what we can imagine. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like Jamal's remind us all of the beauty of humanity, and there's so much more to come. As the sleek black SUV pulled away from the modest Thompson home, leaving a trail of dust in its wake, the world seemed to stand still for a moment. Inside the house, Jamal sat with his mother and younger brother, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and awe. The neatly folded letter and check sat on the coffee table, tangible proof of the life-changing moment they had just experienced. For Jamal, it all felt surreal. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been walking home, exhausted from a long day, dreaming of ways to ease his family's struggles. Fixing Mr. Richardson's flat tire had seemed like such a small thing, something any decent person would do. He never imagined it would lead to this. But now, as he sat in his small living room, he realized the magnitude of that simple act. It wasn't just about the scholarship, the stipend, or the opportunities ahead. It was about what it represented. The power of kindness to ripple far beyond the moment. Jamal's mother, her eyes still glistening with tears, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've always been a good boy, Jamal," she said softly. "But today, you've shown me just how far goodness can take you. Never lose that heart of yours." Her words lingered in the air, a quiet affirmation of the values she had instilled in him. Jamal nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I won't, Mama," he replied. "I promise." But this story wasn't just about Jamal. It was also about Mr. Richardson. As the SUV cruised back toward the city, Mr. Richardson sat in the back seat, staring out the window in thoughtful silence. The modest homes of Jamal's neighborhood blurred past, a stark contrast to the luxury of his world. For years, Mr. Richardson had measured success in profits and power, in the size of his bank account and the reach of his influence. But something had shifted inside him since meeting Jamal. The boy's selflessness, his humility, it was a reminder of something Mr. Richardson hadn't thought about in a long time. The value of giving without expecting anything in return. He thought back to the night before, stranded on the side of the road, feeling a rare sense of vulnerability. Dozens of cars had passed him by, their drivers too preoccupied to stop. And then came Jamal, a boy with so little, offering so much. That act of kindness had not only saved his evening, but had also reignited something in him. A desire to do more, to be more. Helping Jamal wasn't just a gesture of gratitude. It was a chance to pay forward the lesson he had learned. When Mr. Richardson returned to his office later that day, he called a meeting with his foundation team. "We're going to start something new," he told them, his voice firm and purposeful. "A scholarship fund for kids like Jamal, bright, kind, and full of potential. And we're going to invest in their futures, not just with money, but with mentorship and opportunities. It's time we start giving back in a way that really matters." The idea grew into something much bigger than he had anticipated. Within months, the Jamal Initiative was launched, a program dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth with education, resources, and guidance. Jamal became the first recipient of the scholarship, but he wasn't the last. Over the years, hundreds of young people like him were given the chance to chase their dreams, each one inspired by his story. As for Jamal, he thrived at his new school, excelling academically and becoming a role model for others. He never forgot where he came from or the values his mother had taught him. And when he graduated years later, it wasn't just with a diploma, it was with a renewed promise to give back, just as Mr. Richardson had asked him to. One boy's simple act of kindness didn't just change his own life. It created a ripple effect that touched countless others. Jamal's story is a testament to the power of humility, generosity, and selflessness. It reminds us that no matter how small the gesture, kindness has the power to change the world. If this story moved you and inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Together, we'll share more stories that celebrate the beauty of humanity